After months of rumors and speculation, we finally got the Pixel 9a in the flesh, and after our testing, I think it's safe to say the A series lineup has grown up quite a bit. For the first time, the Pixel 9a feels like a device that stands on its own 2 feet, which is a huge differentiator from past A series devices where it felt more like a slight variant of the mainline Pixels. This year, the Pixel 9a is truly something special as it gets the basics done right. It now has its own visual identity, for better or for worse, and the fact that Google stuck to the same $499 price point makes me think they're very serious about competing in the mid-range space. Thankfully, there's a lot more to the story here, so real quick, let me tell you everything you need to know about the Pixel 9a in this full review. Starting with the design, this is definitely one of the biggest changes, and of course, the number one talking point we keep hearing about is the lack of a camera bar, which yes, it is now officially gone, but with good reason. The story here is Google was primarily focused on improving the Pixel 9a in every way possible, at least internally, by including a vapor chamber to improve thermals, increasing the battery size by 13% from 4,492 mAh to 5,100 mAh, and introduced an upgraded dual rear camera module. With all those changes said and done, Google ended up with an almost flat design on the back, and from there, they decided to just remove the camera bar completely. The end result is this super simple, minimalist looking device that still has a distinctly Pixel-like aesthetic while also being a fresh design in its own right. To be honest, for an A-series device, I'm actually really glad they got rid of the camera bar and went for something a little different here. I think it gives the A series a unique visual identity compared to designs of the past, and I hope they keep iterating on it over time. Otherwise, for the rest of the design as a whole, I think the all matte finish covering the side rails and that plastic rear panel actually makes the device feel a lot more premium, and I feel this phrase is so overused, but it is because of the fingerprints. Personally, the glossy glass on the Pixel 9 or the glossy side rails on the Pixel 9 Pro create an annoying habit for me where I'm constantly cleaning them, an issue I never have with the all matte Pixel 9a. Regardless, when everything is said and done, this refreshed design feels like a thoughtful change, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it down below. That said, the design is probably one of the biggest parts of the Pixel 9a story this year, but there is so much more we need to go over. The display, for example, is something you'll be hearing a lot about over the years, mainly because yes, the bezels are here, large and in charge. For some, this might be a huge reminder that you're still using Google's more affordable offering, and unfortunately, I don't think there's some kind of magic formula here. You either get used to the bezels over time, which I think most people will, including myself, or you'll be constantly focused and irritated by them. I'm definitely in the get used to it camp, but I understand if some people can't get past it. Bezels aside though, the quality of the display itself is the same great panel that you'd expect from Google these days, with some added improvements over last year. It's now 35% brighter, going from 2000 nits peak brightness to 2700, which brings it really close to the more expensive Pixel 9 Pro, and the display is a bit bigger too, going from 6.1 to 6.3 inches. Both changes definitely help make the viewing experience feel a bit better in their own ways, and they do help bring it closer to flagship territory. Moving on with the rest of the specs, there are some interesting points worth mentioning. Of course, with this latest device, we have the newest, albeit slightly modified Tensor G4 chip paired with 8 gigs of RAM. With this combination, you do miss out on some software features that I'll go over in a bit, but in terms of raw performance, it's pretty on par with what you'd expect on the Pixel 9 Pro. For the most part, I'm just talking about day-to-day use, especially when it comes to app launching speeds, Google Maps usage, social media apps usage, you name it, the Pixel 9a can pretty much handle it just fine. And even though the Pixel 9a might have half the RAM of the Pixel 9 Pro, there still wasn't much of an issue with apps reloading in the background. With those aspects in mind, it's still not a dedicated gaming device by any means, although it can get by with most low to medium intensity titles. I just wouldn't expect it to max out graphics in big games like Warzone Mobile or Genshin Impact, for example. Lastly, I do have to mention the optical fingerprint scanner, which I'd say is overall fine. In my opinion, it's still less reliable than the ultrasonic sensor on the Pixel 9 and 9 Pro, and because of that, I find Face Unlock takes over way more than I'd expect it to. And since it is an optical scanner, you do get that blinding light effect at night, which is somewhat annoying. However, for a device that's $300 cheaper than the Pixel 9, at least when not on sale, I don't think it's a huge deal by any means. Battery life is probably one of the most interesting topics when it comes to the Pixel 9a, as Google now quotes 30 plus hours of usage versus the over 24 hours metric we got in years past. That's largely thanks to the bigger 5100 mAh battery inside the 9a, which actually makes this internal cell larger than the Pixel 9 Pros and even slightly larger than the Pixel 9 Pro XLs. In other words, it's the biggest battery in a Pixel phone so far. With that in mind, I'd say battery life is pretty great on the 9A. With around 4 hours of on-screen time, I typically end my days with about 40% remaining. That roughly translates to 1.5 days of usage for me, easily powering through until noon the next day, whereas the Pixel 9 Pro would certainly need a top up much earlier that morning. Personally, I still think it's the early days since we've only had the Pixel 9A for about a week, so we'll just have to see how things settle down in the long term, but early impressions are great. We're pretty happy with the stamina so far, and it genuinely seems like you might be getting better battery life going for the more affordable Pixel 9A versus the regular 9 or 9 Pro, which is really weird, but definitely a strong benefit to the Pixel 9A. To me, the only real issue I have with this whole battery conversation is charging speeds. The Pixel 9A supports 23 watts wired charging, a slight increase from the 18 watts on last year's Pixel 9A, so the phone does charge a bit faster now, which is nice, allowing you to get a full charge in about an hour and 20 minutes, which is fine. Me personally, I'm coming from the OnePlus 13R, where you can get a full charge on a bigger battery in about 50 minutes, which feels incredibly convenient for my usage patterns. However, the average consumer will probably charge overnight anyway, so the 9A's charging speed likely won't be an issue for most people the way that it stands out to me. Software on the Pixel 9A is also an interesting story depending on how you look at it. For some reason, it launches with Android 15 QPR1 alongside the latest security patch instead of QPR2, which actually started rolling out to other Pixels back in March. This means we're initially missing out on a few features that those other devices already have, at least until the next quarterly update expected sometime in June. The most important features that you're going to miss out on are the new modes implementation and notification cooldown. To me, it's not a huge deal, but it is a little strange. According to Google, QPR1 was the most stable build for carriers and general testing, so this just seems like a hiccup with the timing at worst. That said, it isn't a good look knowing the Pixel 9A doesn't have the latest user-facing changes right out of the box. Despite that initial quirk though, the software as a whole is perfectly fine and is a traditional Pixel experience through and through with no real surprises here. You get all the Pixel staples like Now Playing, Call Screening, Audio Magic Eraser, Magic Editor, and so much more, plus it packs a lot of the big AI features including Pixel Studio, the new Pixel Weather Experience, and Pixel Recorder with transcriptions, just to name a few. It also gets access to some of the latest Gemini features alongside the main Pixel 9 devices for free, like the new camera and screen sharing capability with Gemini Live, for example, all of which are really nice to have on Google's most affordable device. So far, the only big feature omissions I've noticed compared to the flagships are the lack of the Pixel Screenshots app and the Call Notes feature. Whether that matters to you or not is a hit or miss depending on the person, but me personally, I feel like it should have been included here too, so I hope Google can figure that out sometime in the future perhaps. Lastly, let's talk about the camera for a second here. As I mentioned earlier, we do have an upgraded dual rear camera setup on the 9A featuring a 48 megapixel main lens that's similar to the one found in the Pixel 9 Pro Fold alongside a 13 megapixel ultra wide camera. We took a lot of photos, primarily comparing it side by side with the Pixel 8A to see if we could tell a difference, and right off the bat, the team here at 9 to 5 Google noticed a few items worth pointing out. In general, the Pixel 9A was noticeably sharper than the 8A in most of the photos we took. Interestingly enough though, the 8A seems to render images with more contrast, which some of us liked and some of us didn't. It just seemed like personal preference at that point. Another aspect was the Pixel 9A appeared to have better highlight control, meaning that we could often see more detail and color in the brightest part of the images compared to the 8A. And another anecdote here is it seems like the Pixel 9A's white balance leaned toward a more colder look, while images from the 8A appeared much warmer. For the most part, these differences are certainly there if you look closely, but overall, they feel kind of minor in the grand scheme of things, especially for everyday photos or social media images, let's say. And truthfully, no matter which device you go with, you're gonna get the same great reliable Pixel camera experience either way. And of course, there are some nice camera features included too, like the newly added macro mode that automatically kicks in when you get within 5 centimeters of an object. We also get other useful features seen on the mainline Pixel 9 series devices like Add Me, alongside familiar Pixel staples like Best Take, Night Sight, astrophotography, and a whole lot more. Basically, for the $500 price point, you're getting one of the best camera systems available on the market right now, one that should go well above and beyond the needs of the average user. As a whole, I'd say the Pixel 9A is moving the affordable Pixel segment in a great place. The new design gives the A series a unique visual identity within the Pixel lineup. It gets all the basics pretty much right with the hardware and software offerings, and I have to give Google props for keeping it at that same $499 price point, point, still keeping it affordable, which is a huge win for everyone. But the biggest aspect, I think, is that increased battery life, especially that larger battery size, which does objectively give it a step up over other Pixels on the market at this time. We'll have to keep testing these devices, but the Pixel 9a did truly surprise me this year, and for the first time in a long time, I don't feel the need to just recommend people get the regular Pixel 9 instead. There are some actual real benefits to the 9a that are worth taking a closer look at. With that said, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts on the Pixel 9a as a whole. How do you guys think Google did this year with this device, and are you considering picking one up? Leave a comment and let me know, but in the meantime, I'm getting out of here. Until next time, this has been Jordan Floyd with 9to5 Google. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.